government, free association, statehood, sovereignty, none of the above. Which one won? None of the above. But now the vote is going to happen in two stages. The first stage is, do you want to maintain the current status? Then the chair removes. The second vote happens, and they're left with three choices: statehood, full independence, or modified commonwealth. Remember, full independence and modified commonwealth historically get less than 3% of the vote. So those options are the only thing standing in the way of Puerto Rico becoming a state. Again, Congress will say, Glenn Beck, what are you, this is a non-binding vote. Yes, yes it is. Yes it is. But here's the part that if you don't know history, you're destined to repeat it. I want to introduce you to something called the Tennessee Plan. What's the Tennessee Plan? Well, it's probably going to sound like a conspiracy. I mean, if it doesn't already, I mean, all of this sounds, this is conspiracy theory, right? But conspiracy theories don't have one thing that I do. Don't turn the channel until I show you that one thing. Because what I'm about to show you now, through history, and then at one extra piece, is the way our entire system is now working to transform America. And possibly tomorrow. The Tennessee Plan. Okay, unless you're from Tennessee or Alaska, you probably never heard about this plan. But apparently also people who have never heard of it, the people who took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, they haven't heard of it either. You see, when Tennessee first came to the Union, they had a different name. They weren't called Tennessee. It was called the Territory of the United States South of the River Ohio. Not real catchy. A lot to fit on a license plate. A U.S. territory, just like Puerto Rico. But instead of waiting for Congress to decide whether or not they wanted to make a territory a state, Tennessee said, you know what, we're just going to go a different way. And they forced the issues. They elected delegates for a Congress. They voted on statehood. It's the next stage. Then they applied for statehood. And then when Congress dragged their feet, they went to the Capitol and they demanded to be seated. They elected these people. They did this. And then they went to the Capitol. They skipped this one. They skipped the statehood voting and say, okay, yeah, you guys come on. They just went to the Capitol. Congress didn't know what to do. I mean, it was the first territory going for statehood. So they said, oh, okay. And that's how we had the 16th state. Alaska did the same thing, kind of. So let me restate here. They elected delegates for Congress. They voted on statehood. They drafted a state constitution. They applied for statehood, went to the Capitol, and demanded to be seated. This is the key here. It doesn't matter what happens in Congress. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They demanded, and they were seated. Congressman, any congressman who votes for this, for some reason or another, let me give them the benefit of the doubt, they're sheep being led to slaughter. You know, no, this is non-binding. What? They'll say the people of Puerto Rico have a right to vote for themselves, and yes, they do. Yes, they do. I support Puerto Rico and their sovereignty and the individual right to vote. But see, not so much, because progressives are going to present a false choice to people. Instead of saying, do you want to be a state, it's, do you want the status quo? They'll vote no. The next vote removes the status quo from the ballot, leaving statehood against two far less popular options. Statehood will vote. So, whoa. Then they'll elect their congressmen and their senators. They'll demand to be seated, and you will be sewing on a 51st star attached to the flag. Now, how could this happen? How could this happen? Well, the immigration debate. I mean, Texas is talking about maybe we should do what's happening in Arizona. And what is that going to lead to? Why is all of this happening? Because they need to cobble together a coalition. They need somebody to call racist. So, what's Texas and Arizona? Racist. Anyone who stands in opposition to Puerto Rico as a 51st state would be called a hate monger. I mean, remember that last one where it was the second to the last one where they applied? Can you imagine what would be happening in Washington? In Washington, they'd be yelling back and forth, and what would the cries be? Why do you hate Puerto Rico so much? Why do you hate Puerto Ricans? Is it because they are different than you? Is it because you hate Hispanics? Why do you hate freedom? Remember what I said at the very beginning. This isn't about freedom. It's not about Puerto Rico. It's not about anything. It's about power and control. Progressives know, and quite honestly, so do the Republicans. That's why the border has been left open. Everybody in Washington knows that if they can convince Hispanics that everybody's a racist, everybody's out to get you, only our party, whichever party it is, only our party is here to help, you will have their vote. And the Democrats have already done it with the African American vote. So, Democrats and Republicans, why are both parties for this?